Rumors of War 3, a special that I think puts things into context about how much trouble we're really in and how close this could be. There seems to have been an influx of activity starting in around 2010 on our borders. The Muslim Brotherhood has infiltrated our government at almost every level, our media at almost every level. It is really, it's not going to make you happy. And I ask that when you get down to the end of this special that you look at this and say, wait a minute, is our government, are members of our government, are they inept or are they unindicted co-conspirators themselves? And I think you're going to come to the same conclusion that I did.
Inept.
That wasn't the one I was.
No. Really? What was the other one? What was he?
Frank Gaffney is on the phone. He's part of this special. He was, what were you, the assistant deputy Department of Defense? What were you, secretary? What was that title?
It was an assistant. I acted as an assistant secretary in the Defense Department under Ronald Reagan.
Okay. And Frank, you've been on the show a million times. You've got tons of credibility in this kind of stuff. When I'm watching this special last night, I was shocked, and I keep up on the news. I don't necessarily, I'm not somebody who misses a lot of stuff. I had no idea how much trouble we were in.
And if you don't, you can imagine how much further down the power curve most Americans are. And I just want to say, I thought Joe Weasel and your team, Glenn, did just an absolutely superb job pulling this complex subject together in a highly accessible way and with what I think of as really, apart from myself, the best people in the country on the subject. And it's a real public service, and I very much hope that your listeners will tune in. If I may, we have a kind of adjunct to your program that I'd also like to encourage them to take a look at, because you've given them sort of a primer there, but for a deeper drill down on how much trouble we're in and why and what we can do about it. We've just launched a new video course that is accessible via the internet. It is available for free, 10-part course at muslimbrotherhoodinamerica.com. And I hope that the combination of the two could really transform this from a country that is sleepwalking.
Frank,
at a moment when people who are waging a stealthy kind of jihad against us are getting away with it.
We have a president who said yesterday that we're going to start helping small businesses through the Muslim Brotherhood. And then also that the war on terror is over. Because if you were going to be in Al-Qaeda, we've killed all the bad guys. And if you were going to be in Al-Qaeda, now you pretty much know that you don't have to go there. You got a different way of going. Instead of blowing yourself up, you can go through the Muslim Brotherhood and legitimate organizations.
Legitimate Islamism is the way a State Department official put it, yeah. And Glenn, what we're getting at in this course is it's not an accident that we have the President of the United States and, for that matter, the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of the Homeland Security Department and the Attorney General of the United States and the Director of National Intelligence, even the NASA administrator, all hewing increasingly to policy directions, to broad guidelines that are directing us to conform to the dictates of the Muslim Brotherhood. And why this is so important to understand, and again, why Rumors of War is such a service, is if you recognize that the Muslim Brotherhood's own stated mission in the United States is to destroy Western civilization from within by our hands, it's pretty clear, at least if you got a lick of sense. Unfortunately, I know your listening audience does, and I think most Americans still do. You're going to recognize this is crazy for us to be helping these guys.
So I was watching the part about the Muslim Brotherhood and all the people that Obama has appointed and all the things that we're doing, and it's, Frank, it's shocking. And I paused it because I was watching the rough draft of it yesterday, and I paused it and I looked at my staff and I said, I'm sorry, but our president is an unindicted co-conspirator. There's just no way these guys don't know all of this stuff. Is there?
The course that we've prepared, I think, makes it unmistakably clear, at least just on the basis of common sense, and recognize you're like me, dealing with what's in the public domain. This is not all of the information that's out there that, congressional oversight committees could subpoena or, extract on the basis of serious investigations, not the kind of information that inspectors general in these various departments could generate, not the kind of thing that, criminal prosecutions could generate, but just on the basis of what's in the public domain, Glenn. What we've got here, at a minimum, are useful idiots, as the Soviets used to say, people who are being put in the service of this Muslim Brotherhood civilization jihad agenda unwittingly, haplessly, but to the great benefit of our enemies. And at worst, what we have here is something that I think we've talked about on the show before. The technical term for it, the statutory criminal prohibition on it in the U.S. Code, is something called misprision of treason. And what that fancy term means is if somebody either knows or had reason to know that seditious activity is underway, seditious activity like trying to overthrow the government of the United States or destroy Western civilization from within, for example, that is a criminal offense under our laws and should be treated as such. And, Glenn, when we...
I got to hang on. I got to write that down because I'm going to...
It's a key
if Romney gets in, I'm going to be pushing for many members of the press to be tried. What is the name of that?
Misprision, MISPRISION, misprision of treason. And it appears in the code right next to, sedition, because it's meant to say you can't let this kind of thing happen and not do something about it without being culpable yourself. And when you look at the 6 people we've identified, and I think there's some correlation to the ones you've looked at, there's 6 people we've identified who either are in the Obama administration, in the White House, in the State Department, or elsewhere, the people who are serving on advisory committees in official capacities at the Department of Homeland Security and FBI and elsewhere, people who are being used for Muslim outreach by various agencies. 6 people who it is possible to show on the basis of just the open source information have extensive ties themselves to the Muslim Brotherhood. Well, these folks are, I'm afraid, very much part of the problem that we're confronting that's keeping us witless, willfully blind, or worse, actively submitting to the Muslim Brotherhood agenda in America.
So let me go this, because we also talk about in the special about the border. And it is probably the biggest expose on the border I have seen on television. Let me go play clip 1, please. This is Zach Taylor, former border guard agent, and what he says. He witnessed himself on the border. Here it is. You have clip 1, Sarah? Yeah, I'm sorry. You have clip 1.
Yeah.
He talks here about the capturing of Syrian terrorists at the southern border and how that was treated. And
one morning about daylight, some Border Patrol agents caught a group of Middle Eastern people there. In the group, they did not catch the whole group, which is common. In the group they did catch were 3 people from Syria and some people from Yemen. And they brought them to the station. I was the supervisor on duty that day. And one of the agents called me into one of the write-up rooms and said, this guy claiming he came here from Syria to be a terrorist. He says, you need to talk to him. So I went in there and I talked to the guy for quite a while. And he convinced me that he was serious, that he came here to engage in terrorism. He didn't know what type, what he was going to be expected to do, but he was on his way to Chicago, Illinois.
We let that guy go. Frank, there seems to be an uptick on connections between the drug cartels and Islamic terrorists. There is an uptick in Iran's activity in Venezuela. They just signed a deal to put Iranian missiles in Venezuela. And all of this stuff seems to be moving at a more rapid pace. Are we approaching an event, do you think, at your time in the Defense Department? Does this feel like events are coming?
Well, it is interesting. We're having this conversation, of course, Glenn, on the day that the Supreme Court is weighing the question of whether somebody should enforce the law. If the federal government is not going to do it, the state of Arizona should do it, as they have asked to be able to do, as they've passed a law in the formal democratic process to do. And in the absence of that, especially, I think we're looking at an event or a series of events. We know, according to Congressman Pete King, who chairs, as you know, the Homeland Security Committee in the House, that there are hundreds, his words, hundreds of Hezbollah operatives in the United States right now.
I think he said 200 just in New York.
Yeah. These are people who are presumably good to go if the order is given to launch terrorist attacks against us. Heavens knows how many others of Al-Qaeda or Hamas or other stripes, the Al-Quds force of Iran, for example, are also either here or preparing to take the relatively easy route into our country across a porous southern border without proper enforcement that imposes, real obstacles to them doing it. And here's the kicker. If you add to that violent jihad, the prospect of it, the distinct possibility that we will find these guys killing Americans in the future, perhaps not so distant, as they have in the past, you add on top of that this other kind of jihad, not so much nonviolent, but pre-violent jihad, that actually we're helping to build to, according to the phased plan, we talked earlier about the strategic plan of the Muslim Brotherhood, there was also a phased plan introduced into evidence in the Holy Land Foundation trial, Glenn, and what the phased plan says is you use these stealthy techniques until the point where you're able to seize control of the government. So it is all about building to violence, and under the doctrine of Sharia, as we've discussed before, under that doctrine, if they sense we are being submissive, their doctrine says they must redouble their effort to make us feel subdued. In other words, bring on the violence. So you put all this together, and there's I think, a very high probability, not just possibility, probability, that we will see death and destruction meted out at the hands of the Muslim Brotherhood and its other Islamist associates inside the United States, not just somewhere else. And it will be in part our own fault because we have been witlessly blind, we have been submitting, we've been encouraging, we've been enabling it.
Frank, I appreciate it. We'll see you tonight. Frank Gaffney, who is part of this documentary, Rumors of War 3,